Welcome to the Truth Corner. My name is Kama Burton and I am with Loving Me First. Today's session is I'm Tired, the Exit Plan. Going through years of abuse, mentally, physically, sexually, financially, verbally, I was tired and it was wearing on me. I felt like I was too young to feel old, to feel the stress of dealing with somebody else and their whatever it is that they were dealing with. And I was getting weary. I recall times that he would get so enraged with anger that I would find ways of escape. I would run out the house. I remember running to my neighbor's house one time and she allowed me to hide in her garage. And I sat there for hours upon hours upon hours because I didn't want to go home. People often ask me, well, what about the kids? What did he do to the kids? Well, he wouldn't touch the kids. He was not abusive to the kids at all. If anything, he just made them go in their room and go to sleep. That was his thing. And when I left them, I didn't feel like I was leaving them in harm's way. But I knew that I had to do something. At the same time, I would sit in my neighbor's garage and try to figure life out and try to figure out how do I run in and grab the kids and get out of Dodge. But it was tough. It was really, really tough. Then later on, and a couple of years went by because this was just the beginning of the end of our relationship. And there would be times that I would have to go and sit in my car, drive around a corner. It just started weighing on me. I was just tired. I wanted to rest my head at night and not worry about if I'm going to be woken up by something or woken up by his anger or woken up by some of the things that he was dealing with. It just started getting harder and harder and harder. I remember that there were times that I would plan. I remember when I planned my first escape, my son, I was waiting for him to graduate from his kindergarten class before I got it and left because I didn't want to interrupt him. And I want to say this before I continue on, which I think is very important. Your life is more important than school, than church, than anything that you can imagine. The only thing is not as important is God. And one thing about the Lord, he said he'll give you a way of escape. And he also said, don't be afraid of the one that's going to destroy your body, but the one that's going to destroy your soul. So while I'm sitting here trying to plan this out, because I wanted to make sure my son finished kindergarten, anything could have happened to me. I didn't think about other ways of escape, such as, or ways of keeping my son in school, such as letting the school know, look, this is where I am. This is what I'm dealing with. What can I do? Can my child get paperwork that he can do at home? All I could think about was I just wanted him to finish. Because I hear this often. I hear people say things like, well, my son has to do this, my daughter has to do that. Or I've heard someone recently say, well, I just got a job and I don't want to mess up because I'm on probation. But when we're dealing with a life or death situation, I'd rather lose my job. I hate to say this, I would rather that if my child had to be held back a grade just to make sure that we had a peace of mind, that's definitely something that I would have done. But by the grace of God, I was able to make it through. In this particular time, I decided to pack up everything that I had or that I could think about and pack up my kids, and we fled. We came home. My ex-husband my husband at the time could not make the graduation, which worked out in my favor. So I packed everything up and we drove out to the LA area, and I remember he kept calling me. And one thing that is so hard is to get these calls. And when the calls are coming, I tell you, they are coming back to back to back. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? What's going on? What's happening? Why did you leave? What happened? What we could have worked it out? All this is happening. And what happened was my mindset of me leaving and staying away, and the strong person that I thought I had built it, for some reason, that strength just started to get knocked down even more. Because in my mind, I started feeling sorry for him. Well, then who's going to cook breakfast for him, or who's going to be there for him, or who's going to, all I'm thinking of is him. Not so much thinking of myself or my children. So the plan that I had, I was gone for probably about a good week, but I went back. And as I mentioned previously, it takes 7 times for somebody to get up and go and stay away. So then it started turning into something repetitive where I would get up, I would leave, I would go to a hotel room for a couple of days, or I'll sleep in my car for a little while, me and my kids. I will say my oldest son, I just love him so much. He has always been my rock. Every time I went somewhere, I would say, you guys can go in the house. And he wouldn't. He was like, nope, I'm staying here with you. And he stayed really, really close to me. And my ex-husband wouldn't do anything in front of them as far as like physically. Now, verbally, yes, physically, no. A lot of times he would send them upstairs and they wouldn't see a lot of it. But my son was like, no, Mom, I'm going to be right there with you. So it took time for me to really think about, how am I going to leave? What am I going to do, without worrying about where's he going to go? Where's he going to stay? How are things going to work out in his life? I was still thinking about him and not thinking about my children's sanity and my own. One of the things I will say that I do regret that I didn't do was have a solid exit plan. And I believe that when you're trying to leave, because it is hard, and for those that are watching and thinking, well, just get up and go, I want you to really do some research and find out how many people got up and went and someone found them and killed them. You have to have some type of plan. There's companies out there, there's moving companies out there that will help you get up and go and move your stuff in a matter of moments and take you to a shelter. See, that was the other thing too, was there was no shelter for me to go to. And that bothers me to this day, because there's only about, in my county, there's about 2 or 3 shelters that women can go to when they're dealing with or trying to flee or trying to exit. But because of that, it kept me at home just a little longer than what I wanted to be, or how long I wanted to be home. So I do regret that I didn't have a plan. But what does a plan even look like? I didn't think about birth certificates and social security cards and IDs and making sure I had that stuff together. My mindset was always, how do I just get up and go and just get away? But I didn't even know, how would I stay away? It's hard not to answer those calls. It's hard not to run back home. It's hard when you start thinking about, oh my gosh, who's going to take care of this? Because although I started to be the primary breadwinner, he was still making money. But I started thinking he can't do it on his own. So that got in the middle of my own plans of getting up and leaving. But I had to have a plan to leave. And finally, we just got to the point where we just started growing apart. I filed for divorce and we started growing apart. He went to go stay with some people. Well, that didn't work out. And I went and got an apartment, and he comes into my apartment and he's like, well, I just need a place to stay. So he comes in and we start talking, and we said, you know what? We are going to go ahead and try to work this thing out, and let's just see where this is going to take us. And because of the mindset of, okay, let's just try this again, because again, if you have no plan, you have nothing. So he comes in, he's asking me a question about some things, and I recall this one particular night, he asked me about a friend of mine that lived in the building, and he says, oh, what kind of car does such and such drive? I don't know. I'm not a car person. I don't pay attention to what kind of cars people drive. It was none of my business. I don't care. That's just not where my mind was. Well, he argued with me for hours. He ended up putting me out the house at about midnight. And he told me to leave until I told him the truth about what kind of car they drove. And then he said, well, they drive this kind of car. I still didn't even know what kind of car it was. He said, you still don't know? And I said, no. So he put me out, and I remember sleeping in my car that night, and it was freezing cold. It was freezing cold. All I had was a jacket on, and I remember sitting in the car just sobbing and crying and saying, Lord, what in the world did I get myself into? And at that moment, I realized, you know what? I don't care what happens, it's time for you to go. The next day, I got up. It was a Saturday night. He let me back in the house. I grabbed my children. I had my remote. I went and got some clothes that I could find in my garage that we had in this particular apartment. I went to the Goodwill to go get my kids the rest of their clothes because he didn't let me get them dressed. He just told me that I can take them. And we went to church. And I went after church to the apartment owner, and I said, look, I know I just moved in about 2 months ago, but this is my situation. I explained to her what was happening. And I said, I don't want to break my lease. I just need a place to stay. And she was able, matter of fact, it was 4th of July weekend, and she was able to find a spot for me to stay at. I'm not sorry, not 4th of July. It was Martin Luther King weekend. And she was able to find an apartment that was vacant. And she said, I'm not supposed to do this for you because we're supposed to clean it out, but I want to at least have a place to stay, give you a place to stay. And from there, I knew that it was completely time for me to let go. And that's when I began to release. And that's my truth.